Welcome to Gateway Technical College's video lecture series for Entrepreneurship 1 online class. Today's lecture will be on Chapter 2, the Enterprisers. When we talk about entrepreneurship, there's a couple things that we need to identify. And when we talk about living in the United States, the free enterprise system, everyone has an equal opportunity to be an entrepreneur or start your own business. Obviously, there's different characteristic traits for people who are willing to take that risk to go and start their own company. And so when we look at evaluating who entrepreneurs are and who the enterprisers are, they come from all different backgrounds, they come from all different ages, and they come from all different experiences. We find that there are some characteristics that may increase the likelihood of becoming an entrepreneur, but it's impossible for us to say, this is the type of person. This is the background, this is their gender, this is their age, this is the person who's going to be the entrepreneur. They have some control, but not, some characteristics have some control, but they may not be identified as someone who is definitely going to start their own business. We do find that the higher people have a level of education, the more likely they are to start their own business, but that isn't necessarily always the case. We find that our successful enterprisers are people who are going to think a little bit differently than other individuals. There's a book out there called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and what this book, it was really a financial management book, but identified this guy had his birth father and he had a stepfather, and one was Rich Dad and one was Poor Dad. And his poor dad was a college professor, and his rich dad was someone who started their own business. And it was this idea of looking at what our typical viewpoint is of a good career person, of getting a job, working someplace for X amount of years, taking a pension, and retiring. And the other one was talked about starting businesses, selling businesses, being more profitable, and being that serial entrepreneur we talked about in Chapter 1. And so it really looked at being the serial entrepreneur dad was the rich dad of the basis. Not that poor dad was living in slums, but the poor dad had a limit or a cap to their income. And so when we look at enterprisers, there's going to be some dispositional characteristics that they're going to have. And so they're going to have some natural acquired habits or characteristics or tendencies. I use myself as an example. The first business that I started was at the age of 14. And it wasn't a high demand business. I spent $1 and bought a clown's nose, and then went to Sam's Club and bought a bunch of candy and drinks, and I sold licorice whips, prepackaged cotton candy at the circus parade in downtown Milwaukee. A couple things. It was a great learning experience. I never really realized how heavy a cooler of Snapple was actually going to be. But that was the first business that I started. And I probably started 7 or 8 businesses after that point. A wide variety of different businesses. Each one learning from them. And so right away there was something intrinsically inside of me that had this eagerness to be an entrepreneur. And so when we look at cognitive characteristics, intellectual rather than physical, and I don't even know if I really like the term intellectual, because intellectual is tied into a formal education, maybe that you do well on a test. The book talks about the ability to think, learn, and remember. Now, obviously, you need to be able to learn because you're not going to be successful your first time through. You're going to make mistakes. It's the reality of the situation. And you need to be able to learn from them. but intellectual may not be a formal education to be successful at it. And so I think sometimes intellectual, we tie it into a formal education too often. What type of comprehension and reasoning do we put into it? How do we make our decisions? What is our decision-making process? How do we learn? How do we communicate? When we talk about cognitive characteristics, people will start a business, and the book talks about one of two different ways, the ends way or the means way. And so when we talk about the ends concept, is that your focus is on a specific goal or desired outcome to a problem. Means are then developed to achieve that desired goal or outcome. And so I will use the example of New Year's resolution. Maybe your New Year's resolution is to lose 50 pounds. And so you say, okay, I want to lose 50 pounds. Here's the things I'm going to do, the means I'm going to do. It could be starting a diet, it could be exercising 3 times a week, it could be setting goals of losing 5 pounds a month, whatever those items might be. But you have a goal, a final goal, and then you create the means to meet it. Using the means philosophy is you're using your current abilities to help solve a particular problem. Means creates the starting point for further achievement. Now this could be, you have someone call you up, say, I'm looking for someone to create a marketing plan for me. And then, so you write a marketing plan. And then they say, well, I know someone else needs help creating a flyer. And all of a sudden you notice that you're picking up small pieces of work here or there doing these little items. So you might say, hey, here's my current ability. Maybe I can develop something around that current ability. When we talk about building blocks of the enterprise, one of the major stumbling blocks that all of us are going to have is the idea of capital. How am I going to have money to start this enterprise? Because if you had money behind you, you would be taking this class at Marquette University. You'd be taking this class someplace where it might be more expensive. And so clearly, capital is always the number one hurdle of our students. And so what we always try to develop is, how do you develop small wins in creating this business? One of the small businesses that I worked for was a magazine for people recovering from addictions. And when we first started it, and I worked with the owner, I was the advertising manager, we had a very simple, simplistic plan. Is develop the Wisconsin market. Once we develop the Wisconsin market, branch out and move out. We wrote some press releases. All of a sudden, we got picked up by the Associated Press, and we brought in a consultant. Well, the consultant told us to go with nationwide distribution. We had some severe problems with nationwide distribution. I really had some issues with the plan, but I wasn't the consultant, and I think at the time I was 19 at the time I was working for this specific company. Well, what ultimately happened is, for us to build this nationwide distribution, we had to get more funding because we didn't have the capital, and so we got investors. And when you have investors, now you are locked into that money source. And what ultimately happened is one of our investors got arrested for cocaine trafficking. Well, that's kind of a problem when you are running a magazine for people recovering from addictions. And so one day I came to work, and there was a lot of police officers with nice little coats with initials on the back of them. And my initial comment was, I don't have a job here anymore, do I? And it shut us down because we had no more capital. We tried to expand too much, too fast, and it just wasn't a feasible plan. And so we want to make sure that we have small wins, and that those are achievable accomplishments that we can produce visible results. One mistake a lot of businesses make is they feel they need to be the Walmart of whatever industry they're in. And I used to go to different communities where they were getting a Walmart. I'd work with their small businesses, and they'd say, oh, Walmart's going to put us out of business. And that was always a big mistake companies made. Walmart's not going to put you out of business. Small businesses have a direct advantage of going against a Walmart. One of the main problems Walmart has is Walmart needs to fill their parking lots to be successful. They need to literally have thousands and thousands of customers go through there every single day for them to stay in business. A small business owner doesn't need that. A small business owner doesn't need thousands of customers. They need a good core of loyal customers. Once you have that good core of loyal customers, then your business can continue to develop. And so we want to create these small wins to develop this building block of a strong foundation. Reasons why we like our small wins is, number one, it lets us control our actions. We end up having a willingness to take more action because of it. Our activities are going to stand alone, and it's easy for us to communicate what our actual intent is going to be. Gives us an idea of an emphasis on details. We want to be very specific. We want the customers to identify what we are and who we are. I always have a lot of people come and say, well, I want to start a consulting firm. I'm like, well, what kind of consulting? I want to be a business consultant. I still don't know exactly what a business consultant does. And the problem with saying you are a business consultant is if you can't communicate to someone who you are, how are the customers going to know who you are? And so it is not a bad thing to create a niche, a specific niche in your marketplace.